Oh boy, do I love to cause a little bit of trouble, especially when it comes to my favorite little car community. So today, we're going to break down two of my favorites. The first one, the new Z car. The second one, the Toyota Supra. And for even more S's and G's, I'm going to throw in the new Lamborghini Countach. And I'll explain why in a little bit. So I know that one's completely left field, but hear me out. There's a reason why I'm going to talk about that one. So if you like to talk cars, I actually want to hear what you guys have to say. Let's talk about this. Because I've seen all sorts of Facebook posts, Instagram posts, even things on Reddit about the new Z. And so I want to share my thoughts. And before I dive too far into this one, let me just say that the Z cars are some of my favorites, so don't come at me. One of the first cars that I fell in love with was actually the 350Z. And on top of that, one of my first videos was actually with a Nismo 370Z. There has never been a Z car that I personally didn't like. I've loved every single one of them. And I do love the new Z. But this topic of Supra versus Z drives me a little insane. And I'm going to explain why. Because the first thing is, the poor Supra gets a lot of hate because it's a disguised BMW. I'm going to dive into looks. Something so subjective, but here are my 2 cents. Hopefully you agree. If you don't, like I said, open forum. I want to hear what you guys have to say. I love responding and talking about these things. Let me start off by saying the Z is very well done. It is beautiful. And in fact, I think the reason why a lot of people love it is it's easily recognizable as a Z car. But my question then becomes, the Supra is very easily recognizable as a Supra. To me, at least. So, if you look at the Mark IV and you look at the Mark V, you can see that they've kept a lot of the similar body lines. They've done everything they can to take the old 90s Supra and bring that into the 2000s. And it's a really nice transition to me. It's not as gradual as a Porsche 911, but what Nissan has done is they've taken the more subtle approach. They're like, oh, you guys like this body line, that body line. They took a little bit of the 370Z along with that 240Z and kind of mushed them together. I don't necessarily love the front end, but everything else I love. The styling on the hatchback is just cool. I mean, the wheels look good on it. It's very sporty, inspired, and cool. You know, just the thin spoked wheels. I love that look. You've got the big brakes, and they are red. I mean, they got the red calipers on them. So, I mean, overall, the car looks good. There's nothing I could say that I don't necessarily love. To each their own. The headlights are kind of odd to me. I like the roundness because that's what the 240Z had. But I don't really love what they've done with the daytime running lights. I mean, it's different, right? It'll probably take some getting used to, and that's fair. But with the Supra, everyone wanted that FT1 look on a street car. And I feel like they gave you the closest thing that you can get. Because a lot of those things with prototypes and doing retro cars is that due to regulations changing, you know, headlights have to be a certain height, you know, you can't have taillights doing all sorts of other things and blah blah blah. I won't dive into regulations because I don't have them all memorized. But bringing a car from the 70s, 80s, 90s into 2021, wanting to keep those styling things the same is really tricky. So I take my hat off to Nissan all day for being able to pull off what they did. But what I don't get is for the people that are like, oh, here's a Mark IV and here's a Mark V, and they're like, they look nothing alike. They did a horrible job with the Supra. I mean, it's styled like 90s car culture, right, though? It's over-styled, it's got you can put a big wing on it, it looks good. A massive spoiler does a whole, 180 to that car, and it just now looks super fun. Then to make this conversation even more fun, so you've got the new Lamborghini, and Lamborghini did the same thing that Nissan did. They took an old style, they brought it into 2021, which, I mean, it'll be like 2023 before we see the Z. But they took that old style and they made it more modern. I heard people say, where are the pop-up headlights? Without that, that's not a Countach. I mean, true. But that's like sitting here saying that the Corvettes without pop-up headlights will never be Corvettes. But we all know that that's not a thing. Oh, you move the engine in the Corvette to the middle of the car? It's no longer a Corvette. I feel like with the car community, when the auto manufacturers try to give you something old school, they'll never get it quite the same. You know, even with Lamborghini, everyone's like, oh, they put the same V12 from the Aventador. It's just an Aventador with a body kit. Not good enough. What did you want? What do people want? I'm curious. I don't design cars. I don't sell cars. I just drive them and have fun. But I'm curious what people want, because to me, the Supra, you wanted the FT1. That was so glamorous and awesome, but you wanted a car that was inspired by a race car to be on the street, and I feel like Toyota took those ideas from what everyone was saying, and they gave you a Supra that looks amazing. Then on top of that, you've got Nissan that's like, oh, we're just basically going to give you the same car you've seen in a little bit of a little flavor with a little bit of sprinkles on there, and everyone goes crazy. I get the nostalgia, don't get me wrong. The nostalgia is there. It's great to see what looks like a 240Z in 2021. My other problem is that BMW makes great cars, as does Toyota. And Nissan, I used to say, made some of the really, really good cars as well. Times have changed, and Nissan's kind of gone, yeah. And that is why I feel like the Z brings up a lot of interesting points with Nissan. And I hate that the only argument that is left is, it's got a manual, that's enough, that's sold, I need nothing else, nothing else. The thing is, Nissan doesn't have any other choices. Nissan is struggling, and they know that, one, they've never mentioned the weight of the new Z. The performance stats, I mean, they're not bad. They're actually right there and pretty similar to the Supra. We're talking like, 3.9 seconds, 0 to 60 versus like 4.3. And in some cars that matters. In cars that are supposed to be driver's cars, more of kind of like a track machine, it doesn't really matter. Because neither one of them, the Supra or the new Z, is really designed for quarter mile, that type of time attack. My whole point of that being is, if you take a look back at the 90s cars, and even the early 2000 Zs and everything, you'll see that Nissan and those Z cars, they end up being drift cars, they end up being, actual like grown-up big boy Miatas, right? But the Supra, that's always an interesting one to me, for the simple fact that you can build a Supra to hold a lot of power, but a lot of people don't do that with any of the VQ motors or any of the Nissan Zs to really, that's not a common car you see being built for much other than maybe some highway roll racing, if you guys partake in those activities. But what I don't understand is why the BRZ, the 86, the FRS, why that didn't get all that hate. I mean, it's a boxer motor inside of a Toyota product or a Scion product at that point, but nobody seems to be upset about that, right? But the minute that you drop BMW, a lot of people get upset. Why? I don't know. You guys tell me. The Supra always ended up kind of filling multiple roles, right? So you've got people who make the Supras 1,000 horsepower, and I'm talking about the MK4s. But then the new Supras, guess what? People are building them, and they're making power, and they're holding power, and they're doing just fine. So my question is this. Toyota designed that car with an automatic transmission because they knew that 8-speed is pretty much bulletproof. The ZF 8-speed is one of the best automatic transmissions I have personally ever driven. And if not, I'd say it's probably the best. And there's a reason that even BMW went back from their dual clutch transmissions to a ZF 8-speed. The thing is amazing. And I'm not trying to say that the automatic is ever going to take the place of a real manual transmission. No, I get it. I get how a manual feels. I get the thrill of rowing your own gears. Don't worry about that. LJ gets it. But what I don't understand is, if you have the world's most reliable company, Toyota, choosing to use a BMW product in their cars, there's got to be a reason, right? Even though there aren't many other companies that even have an inline six, it limits the choices for Toyota. The thing is though, Toyota wouldn't risk bringing the Supra back at the expense of their reliability. There's a reason Toyota has not been about performance, because a lot of times you can't get performance and reliability together. There's a certain limit, right? You have a V6 and let's say it's a 3.5 liter, 3.7 liter even. There's a certain limit to the amount of horsepower that car is going to put out that is reasonably reliable. Once you start to push those limits, things start to tank on reliability. If there's someone that wants to argue that, go ahead. But that's just science, right? It's just how it works. You've got, let's say, a 4-cylinder engine, 200 horsepower, reasonable, right? The FRS, right there in that, 212 I think for the new one. But if you take that same 4-cylinder and you throw a turbo on it, now it's making, let's say, 265 horsepower. Right there with the WRX, or maybe 300 and something, right there with the STIs. Now you're kind of pushing it a little bit more. As you can see with the Subarus, that goes this way very fast. And I owned a WRX, I can tell you that's how that works once you start modding them. So Toyota's recipe has never been to go after performance and horsepower. It's just not. The next point that I want to tackle, I mean this in the most respectful way, that what a car is worth is crazy to some people but reasonable to others. I just saw that the other day. Someone posted a video of the new Hummer EV and someone said, oh, $78,000 starting price? That's insane. Who would pay that? For that, 1,000 horsepower Hummer? I mean, that's a no-brainer to me. I feel like that's worth $78,000, right? Now, let's use that same idea and someone saying that the new Z is $40,000. And a lot of people are like, that is amazing. That's insane. But $55,000 for a Supra? That's absurd. Now hear me out. I'm not saying that the $15,000 difference is justified, but to me, there are enough differences between a base $40,000 Z and a $55,000 base model Supra. If you want the quick answer to that, let's talk about interior. Actually, let's back up. Let's talk about the fact that Toyota had to pay to use that engine. If Toyota decided to go back to making inline sixes, there is no way that that Supra would be able to hit that $40,000 mark. It's just not feasible. So the best strategic way to get that inline six was with BMW. And then on top of that, a $40,000 base model Z is not in direct comparison with a $55,000 base model Supra. One, the interiors are different. Two, you're also getting a little bit more performance, and that's more of on the straight line. Not only that, when it comes to the Supra, you've got a car that's $55,000 that's, before the Z was even mentioned, was going up against the BMW M2, which is way more than the Supra. On top of that, it's able to hang with the BMW M2. And I don't know if a lot of people understand what that means, but the BMW M2 has become basically the replacement for the M3. And the M3 already has a prestige behind it. So for the Supra to be able to hang with the upper tier BMWs, in my book, when it comes to a driver's car, and on top of that, you've got that Supra being able to hang with the lower tier Porsches. That to me is worth a little bit more. Since we don't have all the details on the pricing, I'm not going to dive too far down into the Z and just talk about the things that we know. You've got 400 horsepower in the Z, which is a little bit more than the Supra, right? The thing is, BMW underrates their cars, and we've seen the Supra do better than that. Not only that, when it comes to torque, the inline six is a torque powerhouse. So not only that, when it comes to torque, the Supra has the Z beat just by a hair again. It's not huge differences in this number. It's butt dyno numbers, right? But the thing is, that little bit of torque difference, the weight difference, everything equates to a little bit of a faster 0 to 60. And for the most part, everyone that's gotten in a Supra and experienced the acceleration has been blown away. If you're curious, I've already driven the Q60 with the Red Sport package and everything, so the 400 horsepower. I've driven one of those stock as well as a modified version, and it just didn't do it for me. I'm not quite sure what it was about the whole overall experience of it, and that was an all-wheel drive model to make things even more dramatic there. It just didn't do anything for me. And if you want, you can go watch that video and check it out, and then, you know, tell me how crazy I am for not being excited about the Z like everybody else is. What I think will make the difference is, yes, you'll have that manual transmission, but the thing that's going to make this super different from previous Z generations is that this actually has electronic power steering. When BMW introduced this, a lot of people were upset because that takes away the feel that you get from the road. You don't have that feedback anymore, which is what makes a driver's car a driver's car. You want to be connected to the car. You want to feel everything the car has to offer. But this will be interesting. They'll have to now find a way to capture that same driving experience, and they're a little bit behind the curve when it comes to this. You know, maybe they're going to pull more things from the GTR other than an inspired GTR steering wheel, which I guess is cool, but is that really what you guys are after? Let's get back to the $40,000 price point. In order to do that though, you have to realize that there's some sacrifices. One of them is going to be that you're using the 370Z platform, which has been around since like 2001. And both good and bad to that, right? One, it cuts down on cost. You don't have to do so much for research and development, which they've changed the suspension on this from the previous Z. And so that's at least nice. I'm excited to see how that performs. And I want to stop and say that I'm not hating on the Z, but what I am hating on is that the only thing that it seems pushes people towards the Z versus the Supra is the lack of a manual transmission, which is a deal breaker for some, but for most people, a 9-speed automatic is what they're going to end up getting in the Z anyways. So that argument doesn't even really apply. And the other thing is people saying that BMW reliability is questionable. When it comes to reliability in BMW, the problems have always been the V8 engines and then the V10s. Their inline sixes have been solid. Their transmissions, solid. Yes, the SMG got some issues. A lot of other brands, what happens when it comes to car research and development is they'll say, oh, we'll let them do it first and then we'll learn from their mistakes. Just like you got Nissan grabbing the CVT thinking that that was going to be the next best thing, and the CVT ends up being a fail. I find it hilarious because when it comes to BMW's motors and reliability, their inline sixes have been solid. Some of the supporting accessories, you know, like the Vanos system, things like that, questionable, right? But it's because it's new technology. And so I'm willing to look at it from a first generation standpoint. You know, you've got the first year of anything, there's bound to be something wrong, right? Even the new Broncos, it's the first generation of the Bronco. It's a whole new car. Let's just start there. And now you've got problems with hardtops. You've got problems with the window seals. They tried to solve the problem of being able to carry your doors with you when you take them off of your Jeep Wrangler by doing frameless windows on the doors, right? But now that creates a problem every time the door opens and closes. Ford's like, oh, this is not opening and closing fast enough, so now there's a rattle every time you close the doors on the Bronco. You kind of have to understand that those things are going to happen. And I guess a lot of people just give a lot of these auto manufacturers one chance and one chance only. And I guess for me, seeing all the different fails across the board, I understand that it happens. And I'm willing to look past a lot of it. With BMW though, V8s, V10s, they're unreliable. They require a lot of maintenance, and BMW's tolerance on certain things is very, very marginal. Something I found pretty interesting is when the Supra came out, they tested the Supra with the automatic and the manual. Toyota has hinted that in order to increase pretty much kind of interest in the Supra over its lifespan, they're going to continue to do little adjustments through the years. And I wouldn't be surprised if that manual transmission is on its way and they're just waiting. Their argument that it can't handle as much power and they know that people are going to tune the Supra, that's actually a valid argument. You don't see BMW pushing their manuals as much as they used to. And even now, if you want to get a manual, they don't give you the option to get a manual on their higher horsepower competition models of the M models. It's kind of lame, but there's reasons behind it, and a lot of it's just to push people away from old technology. I hate to say it. I get it. I'm one of the people that doesn't really love change, and it takes me quite some time to actually adjust to change. When it comes to cars, it's happening faster than I would want it to happen, to be honest. As much as I care about the environment, I was hoping that we would have a lot more time to see some of our favorites being brought back to life. And so the point of this one is, I feel like a lot of cars don't get the love they deserve, and I feel like the Nissan Z is getting a lot of love, but a lot of people are hating on the Supra, even though that's an amazing car. And it's insane that we even got another Supra, because technically we weren't even supposed to. We might not have ever seen that car again. The GTR, amazing car, and then you've got its little baby brother, now this Z. You've got the Supra with its little baby brother, the GT86, and Toyota's still not giving us the turbo version of that. There's no BRZ STI to be had with the increased horsepower that we've been asking for forever. You do get a manual though. The cheaper cars make sense. They don't have a lot of power. That manual is robust and it'll work and it'll hold. The thing is, most people buying the new Supra, they are modding them. Let's be honest. They are doing things to make them faster in the quarter mile because that car is fast. I don't see the Z having that same street cred. Now on the track, I think that Z car is going to hold its own. But what's insane is that the Supra does as well. But because Toyota is holding off on this manual transmission, Nissan is using that as their one and only key selling point. And they're feeding on everyone's nostalgia for this car when they really haven't done much to really upgrade it. And I know people are going to be like, no, LJ, you're dumb. But what have they done? Oh, you've got a limited slip differential. Great. So what? I mean, the BMW technology, and yes, I love BMW, so forgive me. But the engineering that goes into that is unmatched. And there's a reason that those cars are able to be amazing quarter mile cars, amazing track cars, and then turn around and behave great in the city. If you've ever driven any of those cars, you understand what I mean. And I've loved the 370Z, but people stopped loving the 370Z a while ago. And it lost a lot of the credibility that it was as a glorious Z car. But now it's just another 370Z with 240 looks and 2 extra turbos. And I don't think that's enough. And that's just me personally. I think $40,000, great, but anything more than that, how are they going to sell the higher trims, which there are 2 other trims above the base trim Z? How are they going to justify that? Because once it gets into Supra territory, if you're going to go with an automatic on the Z, why would you not want the extra power, the performance, the luxury? You're getting a Toyota with BMW interior. You're getting BMW performance with Toyota backing their reliability. That should show you that it's going to be fantastic. And there's so many breakdowns of that motor, and everyone is forgetting that this is the same Nissan that has been struggling for the last like 10 years. So one car isn't going to change everything, especially when this car is a parts bin mishmash of Z stuff. I don't know. Anyways, I've talked myself into a circle at this point, and I am just curious to hear what you guys have to say. I would love to sit down and talk cars with you guys all day, and let's do it. I respond to my comments, and if you're new to the channel, consider hitting that subscribe button, because LJ loves talking about cars from minivans all the way up to the Ford Raptor, down all the way to a little Mazda Miata. And I love them all. I'm excited for this Z, but what Nissan does with this one is going to be interesting. They sculpted the looks just right to capture and grab the attention of people that grew up with that car. But now, let's see if they can put that power down on the road and make those Zs as tempting as they say they're going to be. Because what's crazy is most people that talk about all these cars don't ever buy them. Like, oh, I want a manual. Oh, but I'm going to drive a dual clutch, or I'm going to buy something with an automatic. The manual buyer's market is this big compared to the automatic, which is this big, and then you've got the dual clutches scattered in there. And so for Nissan to try to do this, they'd have to sell a lot of Zs. And in order to sell a lot of Zs, they have to make them $40,000. And it's the same thing with the Infiniti Q50, Q60s. They are great cars, but they just don't quite stack up to their competitors. And there's always just that something's not right. It's not quite tailored the way that, I don't know how to, something's always missing on the Infinitis. So yeah, with all that being said, I'm done talking. I want to hear what you guys have to say. So drop a comment, tell me how wrong I am, whatever you got to do, but be gentle. I'm sensitive, okay guys? But until next time, stay happy, stay sane, stay healthy.